Meanwhile, on Triple S Breakdowns.
Ah, Shimo, my beautiful Ice Queen, you have been the cause of so many arguments in the Monsterverse community just by existing. The biggest argument being, did Shimo freeze Ghidorah in Antarctica, and also did she do it on purpose or not? Well, I actually did a lot of research into various topics ranging from ice ages to when modern humans first migrated out of Africa, and my findings and conclusions ended up being 4 pages long.
Now, on Triple S Variety Channel.
Welcome back everyone to the Triple S Variety channel. I'm your host Triple S, and in this video I'm going to go over everything I discovered concerning Shimo, Ice Ages, Ghidorah and more. Let's begin. First off, I'm going to list out all the important dates and the events that happened during those dates. 2.6 million years ago, a single ice sheet first covered most of the island of Greenland. 2.58 million years ago, the start of the Quaternary glaciation, i.e. the quote-unquote last ice age, and I say quote-unquote because the Quaternary glaciation is still happening. We are still in an ice age, even though if you'd ask a rando on the street if we were currently in an ice age, they'd probably either say no or I don't know. 110,000 years ago, the start of the last glacial period, i.e. the quote-unquote last ice age, and I say quote-unquote again, but for a different reason. Pop culture likes to refer to the last glacial period, which started 110,000 years ago and ended 11,700 years ago, as the last ice age, even though it isn't an ice age. It's a glacial period within the actual ice age that is the Quaternary glaciation, and glacial periods are separated by interglacial periods, so we are currently living in an interglacial period. 70,000 to 50,000 years ago, a single group of humans, that's all non-African modern humans are descended from, left Africa. 50,000 to 37,000 years ago, this is the estimated time period when people reached Sahul, the geological continent consisting of Australia and New Guinea. Now, what's with all these dates and what do they have to do with Shimo and her possibly freezing Ghidorah? Well, in the novelization of Godzilla x Kong, additional lore is included that doesn't appear in the movie. In a prologue, we learn that a Dr. Magezi Martens has a theory that Greenland froze very quickly at the beginning of the last glaciation, i.e. the quote-unquote last ice age, i.e. the Quaternary glaciation, and she has ice samples from that worldwide layer containing crystals whose size suggests an instant rather than gradual freezing. Greenland iced over between 2.5 and 3 million years ago, but that was just the beginning, you know, the seed of the ice age. Ice ages come in pulses, things get cold, ice forms at the poles, ice reflects sunlight, which means it pushes radiation that might become heat back into space. It gets colder, more ice forms. The last big pulse was a little over 100,000 years ago, but this event 2.5 million years ago, I think this is what started the pulses of glaciation. Now, I think when Magezi says ice ages come in pulses, she's actually using the pop culture version of ice age, which actually refers to glacial periods, not actual ice ages. Eileen, then talking to Magezi, reveals Monarch have their own ice samples with crystals whose size also suggests instantaneous freezing, but they're not from a worldwide layer. They're much more recent. Magezi then says, more recent? How much more recent? Recent enough for humans to have witnessed it happening? So within the last 100,000 years or so. It would actually be more recent than 70,000 years ago at the latest, since if we go back to our dates, we know it was between 70,000 to 50,000 years ago when a single group of humans, that's all non-African modern humans are descended from, left Africa. Later in the novelization, Eileen tells Trapper about the ice samples, but first I'm going to point out where I think the writer misspoke. They have Eileen say, the very first layer of ice laid down in Greenland almost a million years ago, right when it went from being ice-free to encrusted in the stuff. From the dates we went over, we know this just isn't true. A single ice sheet first covered most of the island some 2.6 million years ago. Considering Trapper then says, like right before the last ice age, I can only assume the writer meant to have Eileen say, the very first layer of ice laid down in Greenland 2.6 million years ago, right when it went from being ice-free to encrusted in the stuff. Since the Quaternary glaciation began 2.58 million years ago, and would then make Trapper saying, like right before the last ice age, actually make sense. Anyway, Eileen goes on to tell Trapper that Monarch's ice sample didn't come from the start of the ice age, the Quaternary glaciation. Eileen: no, that was the thing. The Monarch ice samples weren't from a worldwide layer, they were from a localized singular event. Trapper: Wait, you don't mean Eileen? Antarctica, Monster Zero. So when Trapper then goes on to say, you're saying this thing put Monster Zero on ice and started the last ice age, he's actually referring to two separate events. Shimo freezing Ghidorah in Antarctica happened less than 70,000 years ago, and Shimo starting the last ice age, the Quaternary Glaciation, happened 2.58 million years ago. While you could argue, since in pop culture people use ice age to refer to the last glacial period as an ice age, he could be referring to the one singular event of Shimo freezing Ghidorah and kicking off the last glacial period. We know Shimo couldn't have started the last glacial period. How? Because then the ice sample Monarch found would have come from a worldwide layer, not from a localized singular event. It's not like every time a glacial period happened it was because Shimo shot her ice ray into the sky. She only shot her ice ray into the sky once 2.58 million years ago to start the Quaternary Glaciation, and then after that the Earth has heated and cooled, causing glacial and interglacial periods of its own accord. Also, there are cave paintings depicting Ghidorah on his own and Godzilla and Ghidorah fighting each other. These cave paintings would have had to have been made thousands of years after the start of the last glacial period, since the last glacial period began around 110,000 years ago, and taking into account how long ago it was that modern humans left Africa. From Wikipedia, the migration of anatomically modern humans out of Africa took place in multiple waves beginning 194,000 to 177,000 years ago. The dominant view among scholars is that the early waves of migration died out and all modern non-Africans are descended from a single group that left Africa 70,000 to 50,000 years ago. But you might be asking, couldn't these cave paintings have come from the humans that migrated out of Africa 194,000 to 177,000 years ago before they died out? I don't think so. As we learn from Dr. Eileen Chen in Godzilla King of the Monsters, she's been able to piece together from the cave paintings and legends what Ghidorah's name is, that he is a dragon that fell from the stars and whose storms swallowed men and gods alike. These legends could only have been passed down by word of mouth and then eventually put down in writing in some fashion, which would then make it impossible for the humans who left Africa 194,000 to 177,000 years ago to have done so before they all died out. I think we can further narrow down when Ghidorah arrived on Earth by using the novelization of Godzilla King of the Monsters, which has a section of field notes from Dr. Ling, Eileen Chen's twin sister. It is said he came from another place, the sky maybe, a star, that he was a younger son and would not inherit territory, and so he came here to find his own. Long ago, he had 3 heads, each on a long neck. Each head was like a death adder, with horns you know, but the horns were bigger. But he wasn't a snake, he had legs and wings like a bat. His colour was like that of the sun near the horizon. He was very, very large, like a mountain, and he brought storms wherever he went. His breath was lightning, and his eyes were flashes in a storm cloud. He was similar to the ancestor gods, but also unlike them. He fought with them sometimes. We don't talk about him much. When we do, we just call him Mandander Equinomba, 3 heads. But he had a name. We still remember it. Each mother and father whispers it to their children when they are old enough. Once. This quote comes from someone called Basau of the remote Taza people of Highland New Guinea. From what I can tell, the Taza people are fictional, but if we look at the IRL history of New Guinea and the date I mentioned previously that people approximately reached Sahul, the geological continent consisting of Australia and New Guinea, between 50,000 and 37,000 years ago, this means Ghidorah arrived on Earth at most 50,000 years ago and got close enough to Sahul to be seen fighting other titans by the people there and to be made into a legend that was passed down via word of mouth and then eventually put into writing. Anyway, taking into account the conversation between Eileen and Trapper and how Magezi's ice sample is from millions of years ago and indicates a worldwide layer, whereas Monarch's is only from less than 100,000 years ago and can only be found where Ghidorah is frozen, this pretty clearly shows Shimo starting the last ice age, the Quaternary Glaciation, is completely different to when she froze Ghidorah. So those who argue Ghidorah being frozen by Shimo was just a coincidence because the fight in Antarctica happened at the same time Shimo was starting the last ice age and Shimo never intentionally helped Godzilla in trapping Ghidorah in the ice? No. When Eileen says in both the novelization and the movie her power covered the Earth in the last ice age, that's not her using ice age in its pop culture form. That is her using it to mean the start of the Quaternary Glaciation 2.58 million years ago. Godzilla and Ghidorah did not fight 2.58 million years ago. They fought around 50,000 years ago, long after the actual Ice Age had begun, and Shimo absolutely aided Godzilla in freezing Ghidorah in the ice. Thank you all for tuning into the Triple S Variety channel. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, don't forget to subscribe, and want to leave a comment below with your feedback and anything that I missed but you noticed. I would love to hear from you all. I've been Triple S, you've all been amazing, and I shall see you all in the next video.